afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber. My name is Tony Bryan, your host and Executive Director of CyberUp. And today, been looking forward to this conversation. Got a recent introduction to Dan from a mutual friend and a former guest of the show, Sarah Flores. But excited to have Dan Browder with First National Bank of Omaha today. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be on and excited for the conversation.
So, we had a chance to kind of get caught up here in a little bit. Other than the amazing backdrop and incredible beard, there's more to Dan in this scenario. So I'd love to just, tell us who you are, how you got to where you're at, and a little bit about your career journey.
Yeah, kind of wanted to go over that a little bit. I'm currently we call it a portfolio manager for security, and I have a hard time explaining what that is to most people, but I kind of think of it as a special projects manager, kind of driving to get things done and doing some management reporting and metrics. But to get here, it took me a long path of kind of messing around. Back when I was young, I kind of started hacking around on the internet back in the 90s when everything was kind of the Wild West. And in that process, ended up dropping out of school and just trying to find my own path in the IT world, and moved around a lot and kind of ended up in this spot. So,
yeah, so I know you shared, right? So the education path was a little different, right?
Yeah.
I would put you into the old non-traditional bucket, where you had your journey was a little different. So, and I'm having this conversation with my own kids right now around this idea of skills versus degrees and sales, and how do you get those things? So, where did you kind of cut your teeth in the skills attainment, and where did you kind of find out where you were going and to get into, to break into that first role?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. Like I said, a lot of it was just self-taught. Like, the enthusiasm back in the days back then was like, this is new, this is exciting. Let me figure out what I can do with it. And a lot of that was staying up late nights and being enthusiastic about project and working it through. I'm very lucky for the fact that could have turned into a career, right? This could have been a completely different path if I took off some tasks that didn't really work out. And what I did is, because I had these projects at the time, I took those little projects and I spread them around. I did some contract work and various little temp jobs and try to get some experience into a business community. I moved forward with that and eventually landed a career as like a half IT, half graphic design guy from some of the work I'd been doing and some of my artistic talents. I hated the graphic design part. I don't like actually working for clients and them telling me what to do. But in the other side of that, I got really good at the IT side in the business context and leveraged that into a career. Eventually became an IT manager and moving into security after that, because I knew we needed a security focus, cybersecurity.
That's awesome. We've talked a lot, we get a lot of calls and interest in the program, and it's of course for free. So it's always a great option. But you kind of hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of incredible resources online between Professor Messer, YouTube, Reddit, where you can, if you really with a little bit of motivation and I'd say some self-drive and some structure, can really go out there and get a ton of skills without having to pay a single dime with anybody.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the resources or pages you used in that journey? And it was a few years ago, so I'm sure there's a lot more available today. But I think it's just a testament to your persistence there, obviously, to go find information and content that really didn't exist a few years ago. Where were you learning and getting your content information from to grow your skills?
It absolutely didn't exist as much back then. I was still in the early days of the internet, so there were resources, right? But I remember going into like Windows and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to break my computer. I'll go in and delete registry keys until it doesn't work anymore, and then have to reinstall and get things up and running again. And then you learn what they do. Like, okay, this one's important. This one's not. This one changes something. And there are always tips and guides. But that's the old days, and you can continuously learn right now. YouTube is a great reference. All these other free training programs out there, virtual conferences that are free. You can go to and kind of get anything you need right now to kind of move forward. And obviously with AI right now being such a huge thing, that's also a great resource as a collaborative partner in your education. I'm using it for even just, personal projects, coding projects, and saying like, I am not a coder, right? I'm a hacker who can write some code. I am terrible. I'm not gonna. You don't want me out there writing an actual application for you. But if it doesn't work, I can go ask an AI agent and be like, "Okay, can you fix this for me?" They'll give me back some code that also doesn't work, and we just go back and forth until we get it happening. So rather than like having to Google and browse thousands of different Stack Overflow posts to get the one that matches what you need, I have that collaboration there with AI. So that's my current way to learn, and I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly coming up with new projects, but there are so many resources right now that as long as you're enthusiastic, you can go ahead and kind of dig into any of those.
Yeah, great advice. And just with the surgence of the internet and massive online learning opportunities and Coursera's of the world, right? There's a lot of stuff that's popped up. I mean, it's $1 trillion industry now, this online training. So a lot of options that don't all require you to go spend thousands upon thousands of dollars your own job, or give future income opportunities, right, for that training where you can go find things. As we got ready for the prep, you said something interesting in this that I think really stuck out with me, and an important kind of a kernel. We're going to come back to kernels here in a little bit as we talk about cons, but a little kernel of kind of a goodness here, where you went into this thinking you were an IT guy, but you're an IT guy at a bank, and so you've had to really lean into the idea of understanding banking, understanding needs. So like, dive in a little bit more around that idea of how that maybe played out in your head as like you came into an IT and then transitioned to banker, and I think become, a more cyber informed banker, probably with a little bit of extra skills on top of it.
Yeah, and it's really fun because at the time, like I said, I was working in graphic design, trade show design, a little bit of IT. And we had some issues this is after September 11th, all the marketing money went away. And I was like, okay, I need a new career. They were cutting things there. And I basically just went to a help desk role at a bank. And at the time, I'm thinking, okay, I can do the IT stuff. I don't know anything about bank systems. I mean, they were using, old Unix systems. They were using NT things that just were past their prime at the time. And at the time, it wasn't FNBO. It was a small bank that we owned. But it was interesting to kind of learn on the job there as an analyst. It was I think a 3-person team. 2 of us joined at the same time. And there was one guy who kind of knew it all, and we were trying to learn from him. And he was not a great trainer. So a lot of times we were just figuring it out ourselves. I know one of the biggest things he would do is he would go and make a major system change right before he went on vacation for a week up camping where he was unavailable. And, the 2 of us would be sitting back there and everything would go wrong. We would spend all weekend in the data center trying to figure out what's going on with this odd server that doesn't work now, because we're getting calls from all the banks and branches saying, I can't do these transactions. I can't do this. We have to fall back to our backup methods. This is, again, many years ago. That doesn't happen as much anymore, I'm sure. Maybe at some small companies, but it was a learning experience on the job that we had to figure out for ourselves. And again, having somebody there to learn with you is great. But what I really needed to learn out of all that, and going back to your comment, was how do you understand the business? Like, do you understand what's important for the company, for the staff, for this business to succeed? Because when you're going in there and saying like, okay, I can get a system to run, but I'm not a banker. I don't understand how the transactions work. I don't understand what needs to be done by end of day cutoffs and things like that. You don't necessarily know how to prioritize the work. So over the years, I've been at this company now for over 20 years, and you learn a lot about how the company works and how the actual business works, how the industry works. And that's what's really important, to kind of figure out how to escalate your career, how to improve your interactions with people, with the company, and move forward.
I feel like it's such an important topic to understand the business. So how are you going? It's nearly impossible to go purchase softwares and technology and understand, what you actually need if you don't understand what you're trying to protect, or the network, or those things. The example of healthcare is always what pops in my head around, pen testers putting on doctor's jackets and walking into the facility and asking a nurse, hey, I left my credentials at the other hospital. I'm just here busy and a patient. Do you mind logging me in? And those kind of things of like, you got to, as a security professional, you got to think through those opportunities and what are you doing to protect, or how are you educating, evangelizing to the rest of your staff? So such an important part. And I think a great way that oftentimes individuals, as they make career transitions, into new fields, to really, how does what you were doing prior translate into the role you're going into, and how do you take those transferable skills? They might not be the technical stuff, but just the general awareness of, the banking or healthcare, whatever it may be, to understand how that works is going to give you a leg up on some of those other folks for sure.
Yeah, that's so key to understand a lot of that, and going in there and understand how the job functions. Over the years, my role has shifted a lot, going from running vulnerability scans to actually doing those on-site visits and kind of poking around. And you get to know a lot of people, and you get to know hands-on how that function works. And then you see those flaws and you can call it out. And when you, like I said, getting in there with doctor, going in there or pretending you're a doctor and figuring out where those flaws happen, you can kind of project in your mind where a breach occurs. And that's what I like to do in every scenario. Like, I'm going to say, here's this new functionality, here's this new tool, here's a flaw that we have. How can that be breached? The red team perspective, I'm not a red teamer, but just conceptually understanding how it can happen, not how to do it, is very important. And then you come back and you say, what's the likelihood of that? Is it something that we need to worry about right now? Is that something that needs to be protected all the time? Is it super important, or are there mitigating controls? And that's the whole oversight side that you have to get into. But the first thing is, like, how can it be breached? How can it be attacked? Because most of the time when I speak to somebody who's running that system, they thought, I never thought about that. Oh, that's not going to happen. It might not, but it can.
Yeah. It's, I know we've always kind of had this idea, continually individuals are your number one risk for any organization, as your point of entry for some of this stuff. So the more and more you can incorporate a culture of security across the org, the better off you're going to be. And I think the approach, the IT guy, not a banker, but an IT banker, makes a lot more sense, because, a security banker makes a lot more sense because you're driving that stuff. That transition from graphic web design and marketing over to IT, that's a big jump. What were things that you were kind of leaning into from that background as you were out, probably doing interviews and talking to other folks, and they're like, hey, I'd be a great IT guy or a great cyber person, this is why, what were you kind of packaging as your skill sets that way?
Yeah, I think it's fun because early on when I was doing that, I was looking at, early 2000s web development. I knew some technology behind that, but at the time, if you were a web developer, you were also the graphic designer. You were doing the back end code, you were doing the front end code, and it was a lot simpler back then. So I could come in and I could say, hey, I can do this thing. And I actually had like a portfolio, as today you might have a portfolio online. I was mailing around CDs with like websites I had built, some personal projects, some I did on commission, things like that, just to kind of get in the door. And when I eventually got that trade show work, it was a whole nother learning experience of print design, because trade shows do print, they do signage, they do large format. And I love that stuff. Like, I have a passion for the graphic design, the artistry side of it. And I like to leverage that now in my career when I can. For many years, I was on the team here that did our awareness materials, right? So I would do some of our reporting and our metrics and some of our newsletters and communications and make them a little bit more fun. And so I can use that there. But the technical side is like what I'm good at, and that's what I can do for a day-to-day job. And then I just throw in some of the graphic stuff when I can, because it's entertaining. But it is a good mindset, because there's a lot of folks that are people are good in a lot of different things. And there are a lot of folks that say, like, I can't draw, I'm not creative in that way. And I'm like, I feel like most people can in some respect. They know what they like, they know visually what's important. But it's about communicating it in a clear way that, user experience type of situation. I take that into my, conference work in a way of basically bringing some of my art into my hacker personality.
I have found that I've met a lot of folks that have a creative side within this space, just artistic. We have a volunteer. We've been doing a hacking, a dead face CTF the last couple of years with him, and his graphic design work is pretty spot on and edgy and fun with a lot of the logos and things he's doing.
Well, hacking and this mentality of being a hacker is all about creativity, right? And that's what I wanted to pull out too. It's not necessarily art creativity, but you are finding something new. You are exploring. You are curious, and you are building things around that, building or breaking or both. And it's really about creating. So creativity is very important to this culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as an individual, that you've kind of, laid out here that, you're a non-traditional background here in this space, and you've you've committed to help other people like yourself to follow non-traditional paths into that space. So, what are some of the things you've maybe done through mentoring or through your hiring process that has really helped kind of continue that, we'll call it legacy of non-traditional hiring, or kind of, non-degreed hiring. You know what? I'm going to lie to you. We're going to call it skills-based hiring, right? What you've created a pathway of skills-based hiring. What does that look like? Has it changed, or how are you supporting that for you and your organization?
Yeah. So in the organization, I haven't been a spot to do much of that. We've brought in some interns that have been definitely very, skills based. Usually there's an education background there when you're doing an internship, but I really like to look at that as a whole and say this person has the right mentality to kind of learn on their own, and that's what's really important. That engagement, that excitement to kind of develop into something else. But at the same time, I've spoken with a lot of students over the years, and I reiterate again that you can be many things in this industry. You can end up being like a world-class red team pen tester, and you can be out there and just knows the grindstone and keyboard and finding vulnerabilities and make a career out of that. You can be in management if you want to, and you can move up there. But you have to decide for yourself which path or what path you want. If I had a good conversation recently with a couple students talking about that whole business side of things and saying if you want to actually move into a management role in this industry or something, or you don't know what you need and you want to kind of be broad, learn what the business does. Learn when you're going to a company, learn what that business does and kind of understand that. But I've had that discussion with a lot of folks. There are people that are world-class engineers and they get moved into a management role and they hate it. And, there are people that have, management skill sets that, can't necessarily do anything, be developing anything on the keyboard. And that's true too. They're each their own unique skill set. And it's to find out what you want out of your career and then kind of focus on that. That's kind of where I've been going in that direction.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I really like the idea. What are some of the key, I'm not going to say skill sets, but what are some kind of characteristic, attributes you're looking for somebody that you're hiring from that kind of background that you're willing, because in my mind, you find that person, you give them a chance, you're investing not just, job and money for that person, but your personal time, you're going to coach, and there's a little bit more effort that's going to go into it. So what, you want to make sure the person you're bringing on is going to be the right fit. So for you, what does that look like? What are the attributes and skills you're looking for? Or things that, as listeners are tuning in, like, man, that makes a ton of sense. I'm not doing that. I should improve.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll go back to that enthusiasm and engagement. That's kind of it. It's and that's what I'm looking for, because that's what I had, right? That's what I wanted to do. You can absolutely have that career where this is a job and you're just going to come in here and do a good job. But I'm looking for somebody that's like, okay, this person can be leadership someday. And I'm not in a position to be a hiring manager right now, but I've reviewed a lot of resumes and candidates over the years. And that's what I always think, like, hey, what can this person do in the future? Are they committed to this? It's tough to say. I'm very aware of work-life balance. And I don't want to say that, hey, you need to go out there and you need to start your own lab and you need to be working on this stuff all the time outside of work and building up all these skills. I'm not saying you have to do that, but if that is something that is your passion, then you do that, right? And then it's just part of your day-to-day. That's what you do. That's what you live. I don't do much of that anymore on the cyber side outside of work. And maybe I go to conferences, I build some things like that, but I'm mostly just like a tech geek, and I, do my fancy LED lighting and home automation stuff. But really what it comes down to is like, how passionate are you about this and your engagement and your excitement for what you can do? There's a lot of that today where it's, folks who are just saying like, I just have to get a job. I have to do my 9 to 5 and that's fine. Everyone has to make a living. I fully support that if you're doing a good job, but to find those special people is a little unique.
It's an interesting dichotomy between it, right? I've gone to where I've seen somebody get that first job and they just quit. And I quit the job, obviously, but they quit learning. I'm good. If they want me to know something, they're going to send me and they'll teach me and I'll do it. They're going to tell me what I need to learn rather than, really look at career trajectory, what are opportunities, because I would challenge that. I feel like there's a lack of, for corporations and a lot of companies, a lack of kind of career progression, career mapping. Like, where's the conversations I'm having with my team and my staff to really think through, great, hey Dan, you joined the team, right? Where do we're 6 months in, how are you enjoying the job? Where do you think you want to go over the next 6 to 12 months within the space? And really try to build it out and look at, what does a career path look like, and how does that company invest in that person, or how does that manager kind of help support that person along the way? And I think companies are hesitant to do that for a couple of reasons. One, if they start to do career paths and a person realizes that what they want to do is not available at that company, they're worried they're going to leave, right? Which is a real possibility, and not everybody's going to have a Cadillac. So, you gotta, I think it's important for companies to understand their opportunities, understand what they have, and hire appropriately for that, and then try to invest to make the best culture for those folks to really find and build out the infrastructure from training and support, right? So great advice. I really like the idea around, how you're investing in those folks. Volunteering is always a really great way to bolster skills for somebody, right? There's most cities, you're out in Chicago, we're in St. Louis, Kansas City's got a great meetup scene. There's a lot of things. And, if you listened a couple of weeks ago, I know you did, we had Ben Miller on here on this idea of cons and competition. So, what are some efforts that you're doing on your own time to grow your skills and grow the community, how are you growing the hacker community?
Yeah. If you haven't seen that episode with Ben Miller, go back and watch it, because I agree with just about everything in there. I live in Chicago currently, and right now I like to go to a few of the meetups around here. And actually, we just spawned up, or not me personally, but they just spawned up a new B-Sides in the city that I got to go to the first one, and that was fun, just kind of see from the start. B-Sides is a security conference, right? That's local in a lot of towns. But those hacker meetups are just great conversations. That's where I had conversations with the students about their career path and stuff like that. So find your group of people that kind of resonate with you. And as discussed in your previous one, there's business groups, there's more just like informal groups. There's just a lot of that in a lot of towns where you can kind of find that. But personally, when I got into this, basically, 2018, I'd say 2017, 2018, I started going to more security conferences or hacker conferences at the time, because I was kind of burnt out a little bit at the time. Just basically, my kids were growing. I was in the same role for a while, and I'm like, I need some new engagement. I need some new insight. And I started going to, I went to like a B-Sides in Iowa. I went to a conference down in Indianapolis, and I'm like, this is great. And I'm like, we need some of this. And at the time I was living in Nebraska, and I'm like, we need one of this in Omaha. And I ended up finding a group of people that was starting to plan a conference out in Nebraska, and it's called KernelCon. So I joined with them, and I've been doing that since our first event in 2019 as one of the organizers there. I think this year we got close to 600 people who attended KernelCon, really maxed out our hotel, from the whole, Iowa and Nebraska and beyond region. We get a lot of speakers from all over the country and world who come in, and it's really just like a great time where you can learn hands-on and do these events. And again, a lot of it was recently discussed in one of your episodes with Ben, but it is a great community to go to. Usually a lot of these events are pretty inexpensive compared to like a big professional conference that can cost you thousands of dollars. So it's been a great way for me to engage with people at other organizations, as I've been at mine for 20 plus years, learn what they're doing, take that back to improve my skills and improve my organization, and also just make good connections with people out there. Having conversations is the most important part of any of these meetups. You can go to a conference and you can listen to talks and you can learn things. You can take training and you can learn things, but you can also just talk to people and learn things. And I really find that to be the most beneficial part of it this day for me.
Well, I know RSA just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, right? And everything I've heard about RSA, I've never been. It's too expensive, right? It's just a lot of money. I feel like there's a ton of overwhelm, right? There's so many people, and it just feels like organized chaos. But everything I've always heard is you're not going to learn from the sessions. You're learning from your conversations after the after hours, the meetups, and all of that stuff is really where you're getting your your content information, or you're getting at a B-sides after the B-sides event right afterwards. The conference where it's just a little different vibe between it. And both are good, right? Like this for transparency, right? They're both good. There's a little bit different flavor to an RSA, to a Kernel Con, right? Like it's just the attendees are going to be different. The topics and talks are going to be different. It's just, I think it's really the difference between a corporate mentality and probably a hacker mentality. And both are important in this space. It's just how do you combine the two and really do good work? So
yeah, I absolutely, I haven't been to RSA either, but I've been to a few of those, corporate conferences and spoken at a couple of them, and it's great. It's still some good people there. It's just a different vibe, like you said. And I think that community vibe is really important when you have something that's put on by the people who are doing the work, that is, fully supported by the people who are coming to it, and maybe sponsors that definitely support the vision, right? And that's a key point too. When you're going to those big corporate ones, you're really, getting put on a list and getting so much spam afterwards, where the hacker cons often don't do that. They're just like, we're just like you. We want you to come out and just learn, collaborate, communicate, and we're not trying to sell you things. Nobody's trying to pitch you anything. So even trying to share that mentality with folks who might have been burned by going to like an RSA or something like that, come to this community one. It's smaller. I do much better in smaller groups personally. I don't love the huge vibe. I get anxious with it. Sit down with a few people afterwards and just have that good conversation.
Yeah, I'm heading to the NICE conference here shortly, out in Dallas. I'm always interested. It's a mix of kind of academia, a little bit of government. There's not a ton of corporations, which is, I think, an unfortunate piece. It's just it's a lot of content around education, curriculum, training, and how we're preparing the workforce. So it's been a gap, I think, just nationally across the board, not specific to that one group. To I think just broadly is how are we getting companies and corporations involved in the overall process of just engaging with the academic organizations, the skills pass organizations, and really driving kind of regional collaboration. It's a big, tall order to ask, right, for a community to come and ask big companies to come and give back. So, there's this notion that it's easy to throw a company under the bus as the problem on all of this stuff, but it really is. If we all look internally, it's companies, individuals, skills pass would create a perfect storm. Where only thing we're going to be able to do is to be persistent and establish some new standards of how we want it to go, right? And continue doing things like kernel cons.
Yeah, they make it really difficult. I think we make it difficult with hiring now, because we're looking for that unicorn person that's going to come in and solve all the problems, and don't put enough emphasis on training people and building them up. And I know that you're very focused on that, bringing in somebody and that has that potential, that has that core skill set, and building them up. So I hope we get more back to that more as a industry, because that's where a lot of us started. We started just kind of learning. This didn't exist 30, 40 years ago. This whole industry, it didn't really exist. So it was all self-taught. It was built from the ground up, and now we're very formal. We're very professional. We have certifications. We have organizations, and we got to keep that door open for people who can make real change.
I think the whole InfoSec / cyber community, we're at an interesting spot where the sector's not that old, right? So we don't have years and years of just historic traditional bad mouthing of like, we've always done it that way. We've always done it this way, right? So I think we really have an opportunity within this space to change the narrative of some of this stuff, really build out true hiring programs and models that work, that scale beyond just tech and cyber jobs, right? Because there's a need for manufacturing, there's a need for teachers and accounting. So, I think the InfoSec community has a little bit of an advantage here just because of the newness of what we do in the age of it. There's just not a ton of old preconceived notions that are outdated to do, but it's also it's hard because the sector is massive. There's so many different specialties and fields and careers. And, we get asked all the time around OT, we get asked about cloud, we get asked about secure software development, we get asked AI, of course, now, and how does any skills path go out there and create some one size fits all curriculum that's going to meet every employer's needs? It's impossible. So, establishing a baseline, establishing a standard, what that looks like, and then supporting somebody through their career, like we've talked about here, coaching, mentoring, ongoing learning, volunteer on kernel cons. There's low impact ways for corporations to really give back and help support somebody's role. Again, 30 minutes goes fast. It's crazy. Blink, we're done. I want to say thanks, man, for all the stuff that you've done. You've built an incredible career with a great organization. I think having a really good, mindset of just giving back to others and really supporting that in a way that you can. So I just wanted to say thanks for being a great part of the cyber community. And two, appreciate it. This is a future kind of thank you of just continuing to support folks in non-traditional pathways and going into it. But what our final question is always, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to level up their cybersecurity career?
Yeah, I think my response to that would be like, look at where you're going, try to make a decision at least early on of kind of what you want to be. And then understand what that functionality is. If you want to be world-class engineer, do that. If you want to be, leadership, go in that path. But either way, understand what your organization needs from you instead of what you just need yourself. Understand the business, understand their functions, and understand how the risk ties to those business functions, because that's how you can get leadership on your side, and that's how you can build that long-term career.
Solid advice. I like it a lot. That was a great answer. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. Really enjoyed the discussion. I hope everybody else did. And again, there's lots of great episodes. So if you're looking to kind of catch up, I always encourage you. We're just shy of our 100th episode here in the next, coming up here shortly. So excited about that. So always a pleasure for guests, always a pleasure for those who listen. Thank you guys so much as always. And until next time, hope you guys have a great week. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.